Hi. In the last video, we talked about how English came to North America and how settlement patterns in the colonial period and in the 19th century left a long-standing imprint on America and its North America and its regional variations. In this video, we're going to talk more about the differences between regions in the United States of the 20th century and today, and we're going to talk about Canada as well. Here you can see pictures of different shows representing different accents of North America, from New York to the South to Boston to rural Canada. All right, so let's talk about dialect regions. This map shows the United States. And it shows the main divisions of those dialect regions. There's North Central, kind of Minnesota, the Fargo accent. There's the Inland North of Chicago, Cleveland, Rochester, and Buffalo, kind of these Great Lakes states. There's the Northeast, which includes New England, New York, down to Philly, really. And then there's the Midland, which is this whole area here, which is kind of become, in a lot of ways, the basis of standard, what we think of as standard American English, the non-accent accent. Here, of course, is the South, and here is the West. And there's, on this map here, you can see a number of various small differences. It even talks about, you see that little circle around St. Louis where it talks about a distinctive feature of St. Louis English, which is that the localized merger of R and or. So, like, for example, the famous, like, I farty far, right, that people say, and that's kind of characteristic of St. Louis speech. Anyway, yeah, the St. Louis accent is its own little weird thing. And there are these weird little pocket dialects, but there are broad patterns, and we're going to discuss these. And a lot of this data is taken from the Telsur project, the Atlas of North American English, and there's a link to that, which you can explore that more. So we're just going to have a quick and by no means exhaustive look at some of these dialectal differences. First of all, there are three ongoing vowel shifts in American English, which are kind of continuing from the Great Vowel Shift. One is the Northern Cities shift of the inland north. The other is the Southern shift, and the third is the low back merger, and we're going to talk about these. First of all, the Northern Cities shift. If you think about what a Chicago accent is, which is similar to a Rochester accent, yeah, then you've heard what the Northern Cities shift is. For example, in the standard American boat, that O is a diphthong. We go O. But in Inland North, it's just boat. I'm gonna take a boat ride. The A sound becomes A, and then air. So it's like cat. Look at my cat. And that air is before N in various regions. Like in Missouri here, and in a lot of the Midwest, a lot of people will say as a filler word, they'll go and, right? And that's that diphthong air that's replaced a. But in the inland north, in Chicago, Rochester, Cleveland, etc., Madison, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, you'll get that air sound before any consonant. So it'll be like, oh, what a cute cat. Another change is that all becomes ass, so rock music is rack music. There's a guy named Coach Kozak and his wife Claudia who do fitness videos on YouTube, and he's from Wisconsin, so he's like, if you don't have any weights, just grab a ladder battle. And I was like, yeah, you're from the upper Midwest, dude. And so that becomes as well. So a bus. I'm gonna ride the bus. Please forgive me for slaughtering these accents if they're spoken by you or people that you love. Mergers versus distinctions. These are two different words for kinds of sound changes that happen. A merger is when two sounds kind of go into each other, and a distinction is when two sounds are distinguished from each other. Okay, that sounds self-explanatory. So in much of the country, there has been what's called the low back merger, except for parts of the South and the Northeast. So, like most people here in Missouri, like hawk, as into like pawn something. I'm going to hawk my wedding ring, whatever, is pronounced the same as hawk, like the bird. Now, I'm from the Northeast. My parents are from the Northeast, and so I pronounce these words different. To me, Don, as in like um, the boy's name Don versus Dawn, the girl's name Dawn. Those are two different vowels, but in a lot of America, they're the same. Don and Don. Caught and caught. It's sometimes called the caught-caught merger. I sleep on a cot, I caught a fish. But in the West, it's the same, and in Canada as well, it's the same sound, caught and caught. In the southeastern U.S., there is a distinction which has gone on in some parts, though this is fading in various places because it's not standard English, which is the pronunciation of the H in WH words. So, which cast a spell on you, or where are you going to buy a dress to wear to the wedding, right? Or why as opposed to the letter Y. Now, this is kind of old timey, and it's in certain coastal regions. And it has faded in a lot of places. Let's talk about a little bit about some northeastern English varieties of English. Pictured here is the great cities of New York and Boston, which have a lot of common similarities, but definite differences. In eastern New England and New York, we both have these are both non-rhotic Englishes, which means they are R-dropping. So if you talk about something being hard, or ova, like you order your eggs ova had in a diner, you're R dropping. And one thing that happens is a phenomenon called by sociolinguistics hypercorrection, which is you've learned that you shouldn't drop R's because it's not standard English. So you put R's in where they don't belong, like idea, or my dad says water. He's from New York, and of course this is similar to in Missouri in the Midwest. You hear people talking about washing their clothing. That's also an intrusive R. I'm going to visit Washington D.C. Another northeastern feature is the pronunciation of the R sound is or. So coffee, dog, water. That's something you find more strongly in New York than Boston, but you find it in both places. In New York, you also get this raised to aw, right? So talk. We'll have coffee. We'll talk. No big whoop. The raising of to air, mad, and then raising further with that I sound into it. Another thing that is distinctive about northeastern English everywhere in all the northeastern accents from Philly on up through eastern New England is that there's three distinct sounds before R that have merged in most of the country. So in Missouri, you'll say Mary was Mary because she was going to marry her true love. But I say with the traces of New York that are still in my accent, Mary was Mary because she was going to marry, right? Those are three different vowels. And in Britain, there's still three different vowels as well, but they've merged in most of North America, including Canada. Just a few differences between New York City and Philadelphia, besides the fact that Philadelphia has a better hockey mascot. They're pretty similar, though. The Philly accent, very hard to do. It's subtly different from New York. But it's got definitely traces of that Scots Irish we were talking about in the last video. But in New York City, you'll say "keb" or I'm going to eat a ham sandwich while I salute the flag after I get out of a cab. But in Philly, it'll be cab, ham, and flag. But in Philly, you'll say I'm mad and it's very bad, and I'm sad because the Eagles lost. All right, let's talk about the South. The South, and I said South with an F because that is an example of a non-standard linguistic feature that you'll find in a lot of versions of Southern English and African American vernacular English too, which is either strongly influencing or strongly influenced by standard Southern English. The Southern vowel shift has a few different features. One is Say this word with me now. Are you ready? Monophthongization. One more time. Monophthongization. And that's when you take a diphthong like I, and in Southern English it gets turned into like I like fried rice. So you can say hide, you say had or had. I'm depending on where you are. There are differences in various regions of the South, which are more discernible to people from the South. And I'm told that if you're in like Alabama, you can tell like where in Alabama, if you're from Alabama, you can tell where in Alabama somebody's from and kind of what class they are, because there's a whole class overlay to these regions as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. So yeah, that monophthongization of the I to I like it. And then the lowering of A to I, so made. So made becomes made. I made a mess. Sorry, please forgive me for butchering these accents. I'm doing my best. Raising and diphthongization of A to A. So that's bad becomes bad, bad, bad. I had a bad time. I'm cringing just hearing myself. Don't worry, there's not much more of me doing a bad Southern accent. Also, the tensing, and that's tensing is when you tense a vowel, your tongue kind of gets more tense and less relaxed. So the tensing of ah to o or o. So on. I put that on the stove, right? These are examples of the Southern vowel shift, and I've represented the South here in this image with the great and thriving city of Atlanta, a wonderful place. And here are some country stars whose music often features a Southern accent. Some more features of what's known as a Southern accent include the fronting and diphthongization of oo to ew. So food. I need some food. Raising of ah to o before r, so bar becomes bar. I don't know. The diphthongization of I to a or I, fade. Merger of I and E before nasals. So we get that. We've talked about this, that in the South and in the upland South into the Midwest, into parts of the Midwest, you get the merger of the pin, pen, and pan sounds. It's just pan, 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 which is what we talk about how people say, can you give me an ink pan? Right? So that you know you're not talking about a frying pan. All right. Is that all that we have on the South? Probably. But yeah, there's a lot of changes in vowels in Southern English, including diphthongization and in some cases triphthongization. So there's the old jokes about how like a Southern preacher can make Jesus an 8-syllable word. All right, let's go to the other extreme of our continent and talk about Canadian English and talk about Canadian and Minnesotan vowel raising. So this involves the sound I, rather than becoming ah, becoming more like oi. But especially, this only happens, this Canadian vowel raising will happens before devoiced or unvoiced consonants. So a Canadian won't say loud, like you're talking too loud, but they will say, oh, you're a real louse, aren't you? It's not how'd you do, but it is house. And it's not like hoose or boose, which is Southerners sometimes hear like oot and a boot. It's out and about, which is a diphthong u, knife. Hand me the knife over there, hey. And of course, the tag question A is a distinctive feature of parts of Canadian English, though in many Canadian English and many places in Canada, they go right, and in that right, you can hear that that Canadian vowel raising there from right to right. Of course, Canadian linguists might talk about American vowel lowering. Whoa. These features are found actually in some parts of Southern English, like in Charleston. There's this vowel raising that happens, and it seems to be an influence of Scots English, which is that out and about kind of sound going on. All right. let's go on to who's next on our whose accent am I going to massacre next? California. All right. California. Some people have posited the existence of a California vowel shift. As in the vowel in bed set send is shifting towards the vowels in bad. I need to go to bed now. I'm really sad. I'm gonna sit in the sand. Set the sand, no, sand me your photo. The vowel in butt, rust, and bun is shifting towards the vowels in bet, rest, and ben. Fun. I'm having a lot of fun over here. Um, if you've never seen this Saturday Night Live skit from about 10 or 15 years ago called The Californians, they just like totally exaggerate this like proverbial California accent. I think it's kind of funny. I think this is one of the better casts they've ever had. Um, yeah, the diphthong before nasal becomes uh, bad. Otherwise, it becomes thought. Thought, yeah, that's not cool. The cot merger obviously is part of this, and ooh, rather than ew, dude, nice boat. All right, that's enough of me massacring the California accent, but that I have a lot of fun doing. There's a link to an article on this here. I think of this as like the Keanu Reeves kind of surfer accent. I find it very cute and charming. Um, and it's interesting. We have a lot of emotional attachments to various accents, right? Um, our I know a lot of people like were found our previous president Donald Trump. I knew people who hated the way he talked, but the way he talked honestly was one of the things that I disliked least about him because to me that's like my family. They all talk like that, and everything's that dropping H's like huge, humongous. That's totally like my New York family, and also just describing everything's in superlatives is kind of a style too. Like regional styles or cultural styles, dialects have more to do with have aren't just about pronunciation. They can be about volume, how loud people talk. People in the Midwest are quiet, and Canadians are quieter than people on the East Coast who will outshout each other. There's also differences in regions and dialects between like rules for turn taking, right? When I first, again, New Yorkers will talk over each other, and it's a sign of engagement and cooperation, and you're really intensely involved. But here in the Midwest, if you interrupt someone or clip their sentence, it's really really rude. And in Missouri, especially, I find that people take really long pauses. And when I first moved here, I kept interrupting everyone and feeling like really rude because I thought they were done, but they were just taking a really long pause before they started speaking again. And now I think I talk fast in my videos, but when I'm in conversation with people here, I think I've gotten slower in the way that I talk, and I leave more time for people to finish their thoughts before I interrupt them. Usually, not always. Anyway, some considerations about the discussions I've made about regional variations here. This slideshow, this video has mostly described variations among white English speakers in North America. Um, I already talked about how there are significant differences within regions. Somebody from Georgia does not sound like somebody from Western Kentucky. And often, if you have to live within that region to really hear the difference, like if you're in California, you could probably tell, okay, that person's not from the San Fernando Valley. They're probably from Northern California, right? If you're from the Upper Midwest, you can tell a Milwaukee from a Minnesota accent. If you're Canadian, I can definitely tell somebody from I spent a lot of years in Canada, so I can definitely tell the difference between somebody from Vancouver versus somebody from the Ottawa Valley. There is, over time, a fading, a reduction of these regional differences. There has been increasingly greater homogeneity among, especially the educated middle class, because of the standardizing effects of education, and many of these variations are fading. As we said at the beginning of this course, most of us do not have the accents that our grandparents did, and most of us, I think, have grandparents who have quote unquote stronger accents, right? A lot of people, white people especially, but a lot of people in North America speak something closer to an international a national standard American English. In the next video, we are going to talk about African American Vernacular English and its history and its connection to Standard American English um, and possibly its connection to West African languages. So I look forward to talking to you about that. Thanks for listening. Bye.